fathers and apply those ideas to the major issues of the day. Our guests include those who are in the headlines as well as experts on issues facing this great nation. Along the way, you'll discover the role that faith has played in our nation's history as well as in dealing with the issues we face right now. Join us Saturday afternoon at 2 Central here on American Family Radio.
Looks like a lot of those reports about a big blue wave coming in Texas, once again, overhyped.
We admit 1.1 million immigrants lawfully every year. No nation comes close to that. It cannot be the policy of a great nation to up and reward those who unlawfully enter its country with legal status, Social Security, welfare, food stamps, work permits, and so forth.
Men seem to be becoming less male fundamentally. American men are failing in body, in mind, and in spirit. When men fail, all of us suffer. What's going on? How do we fix it?
Being a law enforcement officer is already dangerous enough. But to give the criminals a heads up that we're coming in the next 24 hours increases that risk.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to this brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent.
As always.
As always. Great to have you in the conversation today. Happy to have you aboard, no matter how you're listening to us, whether you're live streaming us on Facebook, live streaming us on YouTube, whether you are listening to us on one of our 184 radio stations that comprise the AFR network, whether you are audio streaming us at afr.net through your computer, or whether you are, there's one other option. What am I missing?
Roku, podcast, live streaming.
You might be listening to us via podcast. You could be listening to us using the iPhone app or the Android app, catching us on the go.
Yeah,
you may be watching us after the program on Facebook, because we record the live stream and then load it up to Facebook.
That list keeps getting longer.
Yeah.
Pretty soon it'll be extra sensory perception.
That's right. You might be listening to us through a tinfoil hat you're wearing on your head. So anyway,
we're still working on it.
Yeah. Let's turn our attention to the Word of God. We are in the book of 2 Samuel. Remember, this is a book that's intended to teach us how to identify political leaders and leaders for any enterprise. What do you look for in a leader who can be trusted with an important responsibility, with an important enterprise? And that's what the book of 2 Samuel is all about. For the people of Israel, it's how to pick a king, how to recognize a qualified king. Now, as we get to 2 Samuel chapter 7, the conflict between Israel and Judah has been resolved. Ishboel, remember, was killed by these two knuckleheads, Benny and Ricky, and David put them out of everybody's misery. So Ishboel is gone. And now the kingdom is united, and the kingdom is finally at peace on all sides as we get into 2 Samuel chapter 7 at the beginning of David's reign. Now, he got it into his head to build a temple for God. He says, look, I'm living in a cedar house, and God is living in a tent. David said there ain't nothing hardly right about that. He'd been living in a tent we've been packing around since Mount Sinai. So he asked Nathan the prophet about it. Nathan was his most trusted advisor, and Nathan said, go for it. Sounds like a great idea. Who could have a problem with that? Go, he says, do all that is in your heart, for the Lord is with you. That was Nathan's counsel, his most trusted counselor. Next verse begins with the word but. And that reminds us of what the prophet Isaiah said. God speaking through Isaiah said, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. You know, sometimes we can get a plan all worked out in our heads, and it seems like a perfectly solid plan. It makes sense. All the pieces are in place. And then God comes along and blows the whole thing up. Just means one thing. That wasn't his plan, and he's got a better one than that in his mind. So God had a different idea. Verse 4, that same night the word of the Lord came to Jonathan, and God told Nathan, verse 8, I have not lived in a house since the day I brought up the people of Israel from Egypt to this day. So he says, look, I don't need David to build me a house. In fact, I don't want David to build me a house. Instead of David building a house for me, God says, I got something better in mind. Instead of David building a house for me, I'm going to build a house for David. And he makes the promise in verse 11, the Lord will make you a house. I will raise up your offspring from your body, and I will establish his kingdom, talking specifically about Solomon. So that's the house that God would build for David, a lasting kingdom, a dynasty with his descendants sitting one after another on the throne. He said, your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever. Before me your throne shall be established forever. Now this prophecy was fulfilled in Christ, who, remember, was a son of David and now sits at the right hand of God, enthroned as king over the house of David forever. So then David spends the rest of chapter 7 praying to God, thanking him for his goodness, his faithfulness, his provision, asking him for his blessing on the house he was going to build for David. And we'll incorporate some of that in our prayer for today. It reminded me of a time back when I was getting ready to start a church. It was very clear that that was the right thing for me to do. God was in this thing. And so I started meeting with 3 other guys who also were interested in starting a church. Now, one of these guys was independently wealthy. He was a classmate of mine at seminary, so he would be available to help with the preaching chores, and he was independently wealthy, so he had some financial security there for this startup church. Second guy was a manager at Hewlett-Packard, so we had someone with top-notch managerial experience. And the third guy was the best worship leader I've ever been around in my life. He did wind up, by the way, being our worship leader. Anyway, it looked like the dream team. But every time I met with these guys, all 3 times I met with these guys to strategize and plan, after we'd meet, I'd be so agitated and ill at ease, I'd have to go for a walk, a prayer walk, for an hour and 15 minutes just to settle my spirit down. Finally, I realized God was telling me this is not the team that I want you to work with. And so I told the guys the next time we met, look, I don't even know why, but God does not want me to do this thing right now at this time. So that was the end of that particular plan. Then sometime later, 3 couples called Debbie and I, wanted to get together with us, and it turned out they wanted to come to us to talk with us about starting a church. Now, none of these 3 men had been to seminary. None of them had any money. None of them had really any ministry experience to speak of. But about halfway through our conversation with them, both Debbie and I, almost at the same time, had this deep sense of peace that this was right, this was the team. So we cast our lot with them, and they helped us to plant that church and get it up and running. Remember, Woody Allen said, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. So let's remember that in the end, it is not our plans that matter. The only plans that matter are God's plans. Let's go to prayer. Sovereign Lord, we acknowledge this day that you are great and that there is no one like you. There is no God but you. We thank you that you have gone out to redeem us as a people for yourself and to make a name for yourself. You have performed great and awesome wonders before us, a people you have redeemed from bondage. You have established us as your very own people forever. You have become our God. Your words are true and trustworthy, and for the sake of your word and according to your will, you have kept a good promise you made to David by establishing a house, a dynasty for him. You have raised up the offspring of David, our Lord Jesus Christ, to sit on the throne of his father David. He is building his universal church into a house for your name, and his house and his kingdom will endure forever before you. We pray that you will be pleased to bless the house of your servant David, the church of Jesus Christ, that it may continue forever in your sight. I ask you to be with me and my family, with the listening audience of Focal Point and their families, with the people in our communities, with our mayors, with the people in our state and our governors, with the people in the United States and our president, President Trump. Pray that you will be with us wherever we go, as you were with David. I thank you that though we have no claim on your goodness, you have brought us this far. We pray that you will carry out every promise you have made to us according to what is in your heart and cause us to see and to know your greatness. We ask you to go before us and give us rest on every side from the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. We pray this in the name of the Son of David. Amen.
You shall not murder. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. This is the 6th commandment of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder. We are asking schools all over America to put this on their marquees, put this on their signs out in front of their school for 1 week to remind America's students that innocent life is precious. Help us spread the word about this campaign to your friends and family. Please go to our website, afa.net, and sign our open letter to America's schools. We need to proclaim this message, you shall not murder, across the land. Why? Because gun control alone will not solve matters of the heart. We need our young people to understand that murder is a violation of God's law, and also it's a violation of the laws all across this land. So help us. Go to afa.net and spread the word.
Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. Since 1977, the American Family Association has been a voice to remind America that the blessings of our nation have come from God's gracious hand as we've trusted him. We thank God for his grace, empowering us for 40 years of service. As we worship him for that, our heart's cry is for our Lord to grace us to be his vessels for the next 40 years.
Visit the Hamilton Corner on the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Now, one of the things I promised you yesterday that I was going to do was kind of even up the argument on tariffs. Now, I'm a firm opponent of tariffs. I think that's been kind of evident from the beginning. Now, there are circumstances, I believe, where you might want to consider a tariff if you need it in retaliation for someone who's taking advantage of our generous trade policies. Then you might institute a tariff just to say, look, two can play this game, and you want to trade with us, you're going to have to play fair. Now, I think that would be fine. But administering tariffs without that kind of a cause can unleash a trade war. It's going to raise the cost of everything made with steel and aluminum. It's going to be more expensive for you and for me and for our families, whether it's cars or whether it's pop cans, whatever it is. The price of those things are going to go up possibly by as much as 25%. So anyway, I've made it clear where I stand on tariffs, but I've got a number of people, and we have quite a few people in this listening audience that disagree with me about that. So I went through and kind of looked for some articles and columns that would argue for tariffs, that they are beneficial and that they are good. And I've got a couple of those stories for you right here. Now, Rick Manning is the president of Americans for Limited Government, and he is for tariffs on aluminum and steel, the ones that Donald Trump has imposed. Now, where did I do with his? I got his article in here somewhere. What did I do with the Rick Manning article? Like here it is. I got it all marked up and everything, and then I couldn't find it. All right, so here is Rick Manning. I mean, this guy is, he's a player in the economy. He's with Americans for Limited Government, so he's a guy that you think would be, would be a friend to what we believe in. Now, here's what he argues is that combined with regulatory and tax reform for energy production, the implementation of tariffs on aluminum and steel imports will make America a lucrative option for manufacturing operations. In other words, his point is that if we put these tariffs on steel and aluminum, what it will wind up doing is it will entice companies overseas to come to the United States and build their plants here. So they can produce aluminum on American soil, they can produce steel on American soil and not have to pay the 10% tariff or the 25% tariff. So he here's the way he puts it. If you have inexpensive electricity and raw materials available, like steel and aluminum, things that you build things with, and you have those available in supply and domestically created, and you have a road system, which we have, and you're close to market, there's no reason for anybody to build a factory anywhere but in the United States. So he projects that we would double or triple our share of global aluminum and steel production through Trump's tariff policies. Quote, the reward is, as opposed to producing 1.5% of the world's steel, the United States creates a vibrant steel industry and a vibrant aluminum industry. Suddenly, we are able to produce 2.5%, 3%, 5% of global steel and aluminum. And he was asked the question, well, why didn't you have this kind of surge when George Bush put a tariff on steel in 2002? That did not work out at all, didn't increase jobs. And Manning said, well, the difference is we now have a competitive tax environment because of what Donald Trump has done. And we now have an aggressive dismantling of Obama's regulatory regime, which Bush didn't do. So we've got a much more competitive tax environment and regulatory environment. And what China has done is they've avoided some of these tariffs on aluminum and steel by what's called transshipping. That's a term that's used to describe the surreptitious, I love that word, surreptitious movement of goods to hide their origin. It sends its aluminum to America via Mexico. So they store it in these big giant warehouses in Mexico. Then it comes into the United States as if it was an import from Mexico, and they only have to pay the tariffs that exist under NAFTA. So they have overproduced the system, he said, and they've gamed the system by stockpiling aluminum in the Mexican desert, transshipping it through Mexico and through Canada, taking advantage of the low tariff rates that we have thanks to NAFTA. So China's been doing that. It's called transshipping, and that's how they beat the tariff system. So anyway, that is Rick Manning, who is a player in the economy. By the way, if you want to know when the authority to do tariffs went passed to the president, it was under FDR. Remember, the Constitution reserves the power to set tariffs to Congress in Article 1, Section 8. That's one of the powers that's given to Congress. And if it's given to Congress, it's not given to anybody else. So Congress does not have the authority to set tariffs. So regardless of who's doing it, I don't care if FDR is doing it or Bush is doing it or Trump is doing it, somebody we like is doing it, they don't have the constitutional authority to do it. And of course, I'm going to be in favor of going back to what the Constitution provides, which is we send that authority back to Congress and let them, they're the representatives of the people. They represent us. They answer directly to us. And they ought to be the ones that are setting tariffs. Now let's take a look at what Donald Trump has to say about tariffs. This is clip number 8. And here's what he says about the tariffs that he is imposing.
Well, we'll have to see. You know, when we're behind on every single country, trade wars aren't so bad. Do you understand what I mean by that? When we're down by 30 billion, 40 billion, 60 billion, 100 billion, the trade war hurts them, doesn't hurt us. So we'll see what happens. You know, you can also take it, in some cases, we lose on trade, plus we give them military, where we're subsidizing them tremendously. So not only do we lose on trade, we lose on military. So, and hence we have these massive deficit numbers in our country. We're going to straighten it out, and we'll do it in a very loving way. It'll be a loving way. They'll like us better, and they will respect us much more.
You know, I love Trump. And it's clear to me that God's getting to this guy. I mean, Donald Trump, I will flat out guarantee you, 2 years ago, there's no way when he talks about tariffs, he's going to be talking about doing it in a very loving way. This is a new Donald Trump that we're listening to, and I believe that is a good thing, regardless of where this thing goes. Now, here is Rand Paul. He's on the other side of this tariff debate. So Donald Trump saying it's going to be good. We have this trade deficit because of this tariff differential. We need to even that up. We're going to straighten it out. We're going to do it in a loving way. It will be a loving way. I mean, 3 times. Very loving way. It'll be a loving way. So Donald Trump, he is all about the love today. I'm just kidding. I love the guy. By the way, some people think are accusing me of jumping off the Trump train. I have not done that. I'm still on the Trump train. Man, I'm riding in one of the, what was the name of those passenger cars? The company used to make those? Portman? The what? Anyway. Wow. I'm in one of those passenger cars, with the dome and the, the linen and
observation car.
Yeah, and with the linen and with the china plates and with the crystal goblets and all that. That's where I'm riding on the Trump train.
I want to go with you.
So don't think I've dumped Donald Trump. I'm off the Trump train. I am not. I do have a difference with him on tariffs. I'm going to have a difference with him about other things, but I still believe in what he's doing, support what he's doing. Now let's go to Rand Paul. Here's the other side. This is Rand Paul, clip number 9.
Tariff is a tax, and typically Republicans, conservatives have not been for more taxes. So I'm against new tariffs. They're simply a tax on the consumer.
Is the president right or wrong on this, do you think, Senator?
I think it's a wrong thing to do. If you look at steel use in our country, there are 60 people purchasing steel for every person making steel in the country. So there's a lot of people who purchase steel. They're going to be hurt by this. My state alone exports $20 billion worth of products, including a lot of farm, agricultural products. And if there's a trade war, we stand to lose in a big way, and really the United States will lose in a trade war.
Now, what Rand Paul is saying here is simply true. It's simply true. This is a tax on the American consumer. American consumers are going to be, this is a tax on them. For instance, it's going to cost you $175 more for the car that you buy. It's going to cause you X number of cents more for every can of soup you buy or every can of Coke that you buy. So it's a tax on the American consumer. And Rand Paul says, look, we typically, as Republicans, we are against that. And the whole other deal here, you've got the tax, the steel producers. That's one dimension of the equation. And there's no question that this will be good for steel producers because they will be able to sell steel for more money. Now, it's bad. Who's it bad for? It's bad for the people that have to buy more expensive steel. And that'll be the only kind of steel that you can buy. No matter who buys steel, it's going to be more expensive. You either buy American steel, and they've got a 25% ceiling now. They can raise the prices on their steel 24% and still undercut foreign competitors. So American consumers are going to be paying 24% more, roughly, for their steel than they did before. And there's going to be no other place to get it because everybody that brings their steel into the country is going to get socked with that 25% tariff. So I think that's the thing that you just have to realize. That's just a part of the equation. And a lot of people that's listening on it seem to be perfectly prepared. And there are far more people downstream from the steel producers that buy steel and that use it to make products. I mean, they make toasters and, they make whatever. There's a lot more people downstream from the steel producers that buy steel from them and turn it into products that the American people buy. So it's going to cost you more for a pair of, clippers for your lawn. It's going to cost you more for a lawnmower. That's just the way it goes. But apparently a lot of people in this listening audience are perfectly fine with paying higher taxes because it'll be good for American steel workers and steel producers. Now here is Britt Hume, clip number 10, talking about tariffs.
It is a strategic metal. There's no doubt about that. You have to have the capacity to get steel when you need it if there's an international conflict of some kind. But this has been tried before. As John Roberts noted earlier, President Bush tried this with steel, and he ended up lifting them after a while because the retaliation was strong and it didn't really work. I'm dubious as to whether it will work this time, but remember this about this president, Shannon. This is something he basically promised to do during the campaign. And say what you will about Donald Trump, he does try to keep his campaign promises. And I think in this case, he's trying to redeem another one. How far he wants to go with it, obviously, is what we're all watching.
So Britt Hume says, I'm dubious, but he says, on the other hand, you got to look at the fact that this is not a surprise. Donald Trump told us he was going to do this. He said it from the beginning. And what we're learning about Donald Trump, when he makes a campaign promise, we're used to politicians making campaign promises and then they forget about them. You never hear about them again. You remind them of, well, circumstances have changed. Well, Donald Trump, he promises on the campaign trail and he's done it. So Brett Hume says another promise made and another promise delivered. Now, I'm going to give you some more pro-tariff information on the other side of the break to even out the debate here. We'll be right back. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher, Focal Point.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. The U.S. Department of Justice has filed suit against the state of California, which has declared itself a sanctuary state for illegal immigrants. The U.S. Constitution is clear that federal law trumps state law, and immigration law is the sole prerogative of the federal government, period. Can you imagine if all 50 states decided for themselves what their policies would be concerning illegal or legal immigration? It would be utter chaos. The final straw for the federal government was when the mayor of Oakland, California, acting the role of a snitch or a gang lookout, warned the thousands of illegal immigrants in her city that there was a raid coming from the federal government and to take precautions. The federal immigration authorities still arrested a good number of illegals. Half of them were convicted felons, but they would have detained far more if they hadn't been forewarned by the mayor of Oakland. It also put our federal law enforcement officers at additional risk of harm because the illegals were warned in advance and could resist violently. Wasn't it ironic to hear the Attorney General of the United States, with his Alabama accent, citing Abraham Lincoln and stating that the Civil War settled the question once and for all of whether or not federal law trumps state law? The answer is, it emphatically does. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back. Howdy to Focal Point. Brian Fisher, howdy. Brian Fisher is my name, and Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity. So we are taking a muscular look at tariffs, presenting the case for both sides. And I've tried to do the best I can to just present to you the argument of those that are for tariffs without trying to neutralize their message or shade it. Just give it straight to you the reason they think that tariffs are good for the American economy. Now, here's a piece by Pat Buchanan. Pat Buchanan is a staunch conservative, and he's very much an America First guy. He believes in America First. And by the way, Quinnipiac has a poll out that says Americans oppose steel and aluminum tariffs 50-31. So the American people, for whatever reason, are opposed to tariffs. Here's an article from Politico saying that Trump finds some friends on tariffs, red state Democrats. So some of the biggest cheerleaders of Donald Trump's imposition of tariffs happen to be the very Democratic senators his party is trying to defeat in November. Democrats are giving the president a rare serving of praise. His stance could give the trio, Senators Sherrod Brown of Ohio, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, all top GOP targets, a chance to tout their bipartisan credentials and defend their home state metals industries all at once. Casey said, "I'm happy to see the action being taken." And you got Republicans, you got other business groups out there pleading with Donald Trump to step back from the ledge and warning that his tariffs could wipe out the benefits of the GOP's tax cuts. You look at the cumulative effect of these tax increases, and they could wind up neutralizing the tax or the increase in income that the American people have seen. Brown said, he's a Democrat from Ohio, I wanted him to be aggressive, and he was aggressive. So you got some Democrats that are with Donald Trump on this. They're for him. Joe Manchin described the issue as one of many things he and Trump agree on. So Joe Manchin trying to sound as much like a Republican as he can down the stretch. Here's a left-winger that defends Donald Trump's tariffs. This is Josh Bivens writing in the New York Times. He says, number one, some of the criticisms of the tariffs are overblown. He says they're not going to lead to a recession. He said, I've read 200 articles about the tariffs over the last week, and I have not yet run into any prediction that they will cause a recession. So he says that's not an argument against the tariffs. And he says that the tariffs are temporary relief for specific sectors, that's steel and aluminum, facing a specific problem, global excess production capacity. So we'll see. You know, Trump has given the indication that the tariffs are going to last as long as necessary. By the way, he's talking already about exempting Canada, exempting Mexico, and now he's talking about exempting Australia from the tariffs. It would be more of a targeted tariff, which the GOP that are okay with the tariff, they would like it to be targeted, and that's a step in that direction. Now, here's one more, and then I'm going to finish with an argument for the tariffs. This is from the Daily Signal, Heritage Foundation. Make no mistake, I don't know who wrote this piece. I didn't jot down his name. And I got when I went to this printer app I use, it leaches out a lot of the ads and stuff and the photographs, the graphics. So I don't know who wrote this, but it's from the Heritage Foundation. Writer says, make no mistakes, some Americans will be badly hurt by the president's plan to jack up the price of steel and aluminum by imposing tariffs on those products. According to a recent Heritage Foundation study in 2016, steel-consuming manufacturers that would be harmed by the proposed tariffs employed roughly 6.9 million Americans. And the construction industry that uses these metals supported another 10.1 million jobs. That compares to just 140,000 people who are directly employed by the steel industry. Commerce Department found that the net job losses created by the proposed tariffs will be 146,000 jobs. That's more jobs than there are in the entire steel industry. Specifically, it found that U.S. iron and steel employment and non-ferrous metals employment would increase by 33,000 jobs, but the impact on the rest of the economy would be a loss of almost 180,000 jobs. In other words, the effects of these tariffs would overwhelmingly be negative. So again, just to review those numbers, this is what we talked about earlier. You've got the producers of steel, the people that are making the steel, 140,000 jobs there, and there'll be more jobs in that industry. Another 33,000 jobs will be created by these tariffs as people pay the higher tariffs, more income coming into the United States, more income coming to the steel industry. They can make more steel. They can have more jobs. But there are people that are downstream from the steel manufacturers who use steel in their business. And there are 6.9 million workers who use the steel that manufacturers make. And the construction industry uses these metals. That supports another 10.1 million jobs. So that's a total of, 17 million jobs that are going to be harmed by the increase in steel prices because they use steel or aluminum in what they manufacture. So that's one side of it. Now let's finish. Like I say, I'm trying to be even-handed here, give as much attention to the pro-tariff side as to the anti-tariff side. So here is a column by Pat Buchanan. I'm going to give him the last word in this debate, and then we're going to take your calls on this topic. What do you think about the tariffs? I'll read a good part of this column by Pat Buchanan because he makes, I think, a persuasive argument, as persuasive an argument as you can make for tariffs. Why is the GOP terrified of tariffs? That's his headline. Why is the GOP afraid of tariffs? From Lincoln to William McKinley to Theodore Roosevelt, and from Warren Harding through Calvin Coolidge, the Republican Party erected the most awesome manufacturing machine the world had ever seen. And as the party of high tariffs through those 7 decades, the GOP was rewarded by becoming America's party. 13 Republican presidents served from 1860 to 1930, and only 2 Democrats, Grover Cleveland and Woodrow Wilson, were elected only because the Republicans had split. So why then, he says, this terror of tariffs that grips the GOP? Jeff Flake said trade wars are not won, they are only lost. But this, Pat Buchanan says, is ahistorical nonsense. The United States, he says, relied on tariffs to convert from an agricultural economy in 1800 to the mightiest manufacturing power on earth by 1900. Bismarck's Germany, born in 1871, followed the U.S. example and swept past free trade Britain before World War I. In other words, Germany used tariffs. Great Britain did not, and it wasn't long before Germany had surpassed Britain as an economic power. Does Senator Flake think Japan rose to post-war preeminence through free trade? Tokyo kept U.S. products out of Japan while dumping cars, radios, TVs, and motorcycles here to kill the industries of the nation that was defending them. Rob, maybe you can answer this question. Japan makes a lot of motorcycles. Honda makes motorcycles. And did they hurt the Harley-Davidson? Was it imports from Japan? Did that hurt Harley-Davidson, or was it other things? Or do you remember?
You know, I don't know.
All right. Well, they were dumping motorcycles, and so maybe that had some impact. I mean, Harley-Davidson's barely survived a number of times, and it could be because of the imports that are coming in. Both Nixon and Reagan had to devalue the dollar to counter the predatory trade policies of Japan. Since Bush won, we have run $12 trillion in trade deficits, and in the first decade in this century, we lost 55,000 factories and 6 million manufacturing jobs. This is Pat Buchanan. So it says, if we are to turn our $800 billion trade deficit in goods into an $800 billion surplus and stop the looting of America's industrial base and the gutting of our cities and towns, sacrifices will have to be made. That's higher taxes for the American consumer. That's what he's saying. But if we are not up to it, we will lose our independence as the countries of the EU have lost theirs. Specifically, we need to shift taxes off goods that are produced in the U.S. and impose taxes on goods that are imported into the U.S. This is a great idea. Let's not tax goods that are made in the United States. Let's impose taxes on goods that are shipped into the United States, people that want to sell them here. Let's put taxes on those goods and lift them from American products. So it's a great idea if you can find a way to do it. As we import nearly $2.5 trillion in goods, a tariff on imported goods rising gradually to 20% would initially produce $500 billion in revenue. All that tariff revenue could be used to eliminate and replace all taxes on production inside the U.S. As the price of foreign goods rose, U.S. products would replace foreign-made products because they could make them cheaper here than you could pay to have them imported. Assume a Lexus costs $50,000 in the U.S. and a 20% tariff were imposed. That would raise the cost of the Lexus to $60,000. What would the Japanese producers do? They could accept the loss in sales in the world's greatest market, just write off the losses. They could cut their prices to hold their U.S. market share and trim their profit margins, or they could shift production to the United States, building their cars here and keeping their market. And obviously, from an economic sense, Pat Buchanan is arguing that would be the most attractive option. How have EU nations run up endless trade surpluses with America? By imposing a value-added tax on imports from the U.S. It's kind of a hidden tax because it's imposed on the purchase price, not on the product itself, but you got to pay. It's like a sales tax on everything that you buy, while rebating the VAT, that's a value-added tax, on exports to the USA. So the same VAT, it's supposed to be on those products, but they trim it. They reimburse the companies for their value-added tax on exports that go to the USA. So what he says, Pat Buchanan and some says we should tax foreign-made goods and use the revenue dollar for dollar to cut taxes on domestic production. The idea is not to keep foreign goods out, but to induce foreign companies to move production here. He says it's kind of like states that charge higher tuition on out-of-state students at their top universities. So Pat Buchanan has the last word. Want to know what you think? What do you think about tariffs? Pro, for, or against them? Number to call, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. See what you think. Normally talking about tariffs would be the quickest way to kill a talk radio program. I'm counting on you to keep it alive.
This scroll is the title deed to this earth. And through the tribulation that is going to take place on this earth, Jesus Christ is going to once again gain control of the earth that belongs to Him.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Some 2,000 years ago, the followers of the crucified Christ learned that He had risen from the grave. They quickly spread the word that Jesus was alive. It's good news that spread from one generation to the next, and now it's our turn. One way to tell this extraordinary news to others is by simply wearing and sharing our colorful He Lives Easter buttons. Get your pack of 10 today at afastore.net.
Hey, I'm Brant. Maybe you've heard me talking about MediShare, but now I give you my friend Sherry.
Yes, I have loved MediShare. Loved it.
Is that all you have to say? Because this will be a really short announcement.
No, I really do love it. I've saved hundreds a month. And overall, I just think it's a better choice of a healthcare program for me. I'm really happy with it. And honestly, normally, I don't even like talking about this stuff.
Nobody does.
But MediShare is different. MediShare members share each other's healthcare bills. We pray for each other. It's a not-for-profit, so we all save money.
True. Tell them about the thing.
What thing?
The online thing.
Oh, yeah, I used that the other night. MediShare members can now access a doctor online 24/7. You can get a prescription for the flu or something just that fast.
So MediShare can save you hundreds a month. You get to be part of the community. You get a huge network of doctors and providers to choose from.
It's all pretty awesome.
It's all pretty awesome.
It's all pretty awesome.
The final verdict from Jerry. So call 855-SALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-SALM-23.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Talking about tariffs. You for them or are you against them? Number to call is 888-589-8840. Jeff is looking up the possible, it popped into my head that Ronald Reagan imposed tariffs on Japanese motorcycles to protect Harley-Davidson. Jeff's going to tell us in just a minute if that's true and how it worked. One little anecdote I want to tell. This is from a book written in 1888 called The Tariff History of the United States. Economist Frank William Taussig says that American steel tariffs as high as 90% on British steel in the wake of the Civil War allowed the American steel industry to flourish while simultaneously helping pay the nation's bills. Remember, they were building railroads all over. The Transcontinental Railroad were being built during this time. By 1877, the average price of steel rails in England was only a little over $31 per ton. And since 1877, the English price, not on the average, has been so high as $28 per ton. So the duty of $28, that was the tariff, which this country imposed, therefore became equivalent to more than 100% on the foreign price. But it worked. It was an enormous gain to the producers of its steel rails in the United States. Now, before the 16th Amendment was passed into law back in 1913, making the federal income tax a permanent feature, up to 95% of the money our government collected was from tariffs. That's one of the reasons why government was small. I don't want to get off on this, chase this squirrel very far, but our revenue to the federal government, because when we were relying on tariffs, was about 3% of GDP. That's all the money, 3 to 5%. That's all the money our federal government had to spend. That's why before 1916 it was so small. It was lean and mean. And the income tax allowed that thing to balloon to ginormous proportions. Anyway, up to 95% of the money our government collected by 1916 was from tariffs, were a consistent form of revenue until the 1940s. But then in the 1940s, the government started looking at tariffs as a matter of trade more than a matter of revenue collection. So anyway, he goes on to say, look, you increase tariffs on steel, aluminum, it's going to make steel and aluminum products more expensive. That is kind of obvious, a no-brainer. All right, for them or against them, let's see what our folks think. Let's begin by talking to Sandy in Allen, Texas. Sandy, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, I was just going to say that the whole purpose of founding the federal government was for the states to be represented overseas to other countries. That was the only purpose of the federal government. And so that was their job, and that's how they got funded, was the taxes that were charged on goods coming into the country. There was no such thing, like you just got done saying, there was no such thing as the people paying for the federal government. Outside countries paid for the federal government. And the steel industry, my father-in-law is a very well-known gentleman in repairing oil rigs and stuff like that. The steel industry from Chicago has, from China, has caused tremendous damage in the oil industry because the steel that's coming in from China is not anywhere near the grade of steel that the United States was manufacturing. So it would be a blessing to everybody to decrease the steel coming from these countries and to let the United States go back to making the top grade steel that we did make. So we want these tariffs. We want this steel to slow down coming in from other countries, and the United States go back to being. But you know, there's cities out in West Pennsylvania that when the steel industry dropped and those cities turned into ghost towns, that's a detriment to our people. So anything that would put our people back to work needs to be done.
All right, Sandy, I appreciate the call. And I remember reading a lot of stories about that over the years about how inferior foreign steel is. And they bought it because it was cheaper, but it wasn't the quality that American companies were producing. They would prefer the American steel, but the cost differential was too much. They were just irresistibly drawn to Chinese steel. And I don't know if Japanese were importing steel or not. All right, Sandy, that's a good word. And going back to the Constitution, I want you to listen to two things. This is Article 1, Section 8. The Congress shall have power, notice not the executive, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, that's another word for tariffs, and excises, to pay the debts, provide for the common defense, and general welfare of the United States. That's how we fund the government. That's the idea, through these tariffs that are collected. Then it says in verse 3, the third power under Article 1, Section 8 is to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. Now, commerce had a very specific technical meaning at the time. When you regulated commerce, that means you were the one that got to set what the tariffs were. That's all it meant. I mean, today it's turned into we're going to impose regulations on manufacturing and environmental restrictions. That's not what it means in the Constitution, not what the founders meant by regulating commerce. They meant one thing and one thing only. Congress will have the authority to set tariffs for foreign commerce and also have the authority, the sole authority to set tariffs. If there's any commerce between the states that involves tariffs, the federal government's going to set that to keep the states from falling into a tariff war, trade war. Let's go to Chris in Texas. Chris, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Well, welcome back to the Trump train. This is Chris from Texas.
Chris,
I called you a couple of days ago.
I never got off. I might have gone to the smoking car for a few miles, but I never got off of the Trump, or whatever you want to call it. I went back to the video game room for a few minutes, but I never got off the Trump train. All right, Chris, I got you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, but at the top of the news on AFA, it stated that many closed steel towns are now reopening and that many of the workers are going back to work. So that is so awesome. I think this is going to be great for our economy in America. And regarding the cons, the manufacturing companies who are going to use the China steel and have to pass that price on to Americans and to their products. Well, why don't they use American steel? I think that's pretty obvious. You won't get taxed if you're buying it in America.
Right.
And regarding Paul Ryan, if he doesn't like it, that kind of tells me it's possibly a good thing, hearing where he's been talking before. And lastly, thanks to President Trump for keeping his promise. And thank you for getting that voice out there and letting us all hear your opinions, and we appreciate you and getting the word out.
All right, you bet, Chris. Thank you for that. You know, talking about Paul Ryan, anything he's for, Chris says, I'm going to be against just on principle because I don't think that guy knows what he's doing. That's not always a bad idea if you're talking about the right politician. I'm not saying Paul Ryan's in that category. But, you know, with the Democrats, virtually anything they're for, you know, probably something that we ought to be against, because if they're for it, that means there's probably going to be something hinky about it when you look at it pretty closely. All right, let's go to Ruth in Tupelo, Mississippi. Ruth, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi there, Brother Brian. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Ruth. How are you?
That's good. I keep you in my prayers every day.
Thank you.
Sir, I think it makes perfect sense to me. And our president is a top businessman, so he knows about how to deal with finances. To me, pretty doggone good since he's been, you know, financially blessed as he has. So, yes, I'm all for it. Yes, sir.
All right.
I sure am.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. I appreciate that. Ruth, angling for a job to be in the where you drive the train. What do you call that? The
engineer.
Yeah, I want to be the engineer on the Trump train. Yeah. All right, Ruth, thank you for that. I think Chris is glad to have me back on the Trump train, but she wants to start me kind of at the back of the train. I'm going to have to work my way to the passenger car.
Have you noticed they're all women callers so far?
Yeah.
Weighing in on steel
on tariffs.
Yeah.
Let's go to Jay, Houston, Texas. Welcome, Jay. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian. Hey, if I get this correct, hello?
Yes, go right ahead. We got you 5 by 5.
Okay. All right, good. If I get this correctly, the being
Jay, now it looks like we're losing you. Are you on a cell phone, Jay?
Are
you?
Yes. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you now. Stay right where you are. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. All right. The tariffs that are going to be imposed, steel and aluminum, I think it seems like the end game that Trump's after, and the goal is to eventually get foreign corporations to come to the United States and build their factories here to employ American workers. Is that sound right?
I think you're right about that, Jay. That's part of the big picture here. Yes.
Yes, that's what I think. That's what he's after. On the surface, it didn't sound like, well, you know, they're not going to pay a tariff. What they're going to do is they're just going to go up there steel and aluminum imports, and then they're not going to pay a tariff. They're going to charge more for steel and aluminum coming from foreign countries.
Mm-hmm.
You know, on the surface. But then when you got to explain it a few minutes ago, and I went, oh, that's Trump's end game. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Is eventually get foreign corporations to come to the United States because of the tariffs and want to build their factories here and employ American workers, and it's all good.
Yeah, all right, Jay. And he's talked about that frequently. He wants to make America the best place in the world to do business. He wants to make America a place that's so attractive to do business that foreign companies, instead of American companies being sold overseas, you know, like Anheuser-Busch, they sold out to some company in Belgium. I mean, you can't get any more American than Anheuser-Busch. They sold because the corporate tax rate was so much cheaper in Belgium. Well, that's gone. We got a competitive corporate tax rate, and Donald Trump's view is, hey, why don't we make it so attractive in America to do business, they start coming here to do business. All right, let's go to Jane in Glen Allen, Virginia. Jane, welcome. What's on your mind? I got about 20 seconds. In essence, if you'll hang on, I'll take you after the news. Jane, what's on your mind? Hit me.
I can say it quickly. I think the President Trump is doing this because it's also going to help the coal industry, because you have to have coal to fire up these steel plants, and I think that's why Joe Manchin's on board, and Pennsylvania's on board, and Ohio's on board, and Virginia, and that's what I think.
All right, Jane, I think you're exactly right. That's another thing Donald Trump has talked about from the beginning, wanted to revitalize the coal industry. Started doing that by getting rid of burdensome regulations. Now he's making this move to make it more attractive. Be back after the news.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Share the message that Jesus is alive. Wear and share the colorful American Family Association's He Lives Easter buttons. If you're a business owner or pastor, order several to give away. We encourage you to wear a button yourself and share the rest with others so that they too can proclaim this life-changing message. They're sold in packs of 10. Get your AFA Easter button at afastore.net.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. In the aftermath of the Parkland, Florida school shooting, there are bipartisan calls in Congress for judges to take away weapons from people who are believed to be planning to do harm. Jared Halpern has more.
A handful of states have what are called gun restraining order laws, the ability for law enforcement or families to ask a judge to temporarily order guns taken away from people believed to be a danger to themselves or others. 2 U.S. senators are now proposing a federal solution.
Every state will have an opportunity to go to a federal judge or magistrate and inform them that this person is about to blow.
South Carolina Republican Lindsey Graham and Connecticut Democrat Richard Blumenthal's proposal would require a hearing within 72 hours for gun owners to make their case, and additional hearings every 180 days. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Meanwhile, President Trump today had praise for efforts by Florida lawmakers to make students safer, including allowing some teachers to be armed.
A certain group of people have great talent. They're in the school. They love their students. It's concealed, and I think it brings great safety. They're on the site. You don't have to call them. It doesn't take 15 or 20 minutes to get there.
And the heads of some of the biggest developers in video games will be meeting with President Trump later today to discuss the issue of violence in gaming.
The meeting with video game industry leaders and members of Congress comes 3 weeks after the mass shooting at a South Florida high school that killed 17 people. According to a White House spokeswoman, the discussion will focus on violent video game exposure and the correlation to aggression and desensitization in children. The president has placed some of the blame for the Parkland shooting on the video game industry, which puts out titles that sometimes glorify guns and violence. The entertainment industry cites various studies that have found no link between violence and video games. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
A pro-life expert suggests statistics prove Planned Parenthood's name is deceptive. Charlie Butts has more.
Planned Parenthood, which receives over $500 million in funds from the federal government, claims to provide extensive health care to the poor. But Lila Rose of Live Action, a guest on AFR's Sandy Rios in the Morning, has taken a look at the abortion conglomerate's own figures.
The folks who run Planned Parenthood boast that they provide life-saving cancer screenings, and they do. Just not that many of them, less than 2% of the nation's screenings each year. They talk about providing breast exams. They do, but just not that many of them. Again, less than 2% of the nation's total.
When a patient seeks an abortion, for example, several steps are taken, such as pregnancy tests, prescriptions, and so forth, and they add those up to suggest several patients, when it services only for one.
They talk about providing ultrasounds, but the last thing they want to do is show a pregnant woman an image of her growing child. So they don't. The ultrasound is only for Planned Parenthood's use to better facilitate patients' abortions.
Abortion is the primary Planned Parenthood service, doing over 1/3 of the nation's abortions. Rose says that's equivalent to every resident of St. Louis or Pittsburgh wiped out every year. That's over 880 abortions every day, and abortion every 98 seconds. Planned Parenthood does little to plan for parenthood, but more for helping people to escape it. So based on that, Rose says the name is misleading. I'm Charlie Butts.
And a U.S. steel plant in Illinois is bringing back hundreds of workers because of President Trump's announcement of a 25% tariff on steel imports.
Phones are ringing off the hook at United Steelworkers Local 1899 on the announcement that U.S. Steel Corp is restarting one of 2 blast furnaces at its plant in Granite City, Illinois, and bringing back some 500 steel workers who were laid off there in 2015.
This is such a
an important start to getting families, hardworking families, back to work.
Illinois Senator Democrat Tammy Duckworth. Steel union reps tell Fox News that workers could be back on the job there as early as a couple of weeks, with the plant fully functional within a couple of months. In Chicago, Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
This is Steve Conover inviting you to listen to the Friends of Israel Today each week on this station. Here's our host and Bible teacher, Chris Katulka.
Hey everybody, the Friends of Israel Today is a unique radio show that teaches biblical truth for changing times. We do this through Q&A, timely interviews, dramatic readings from the life of Holocaust survivor Zvi Kalisher, and of course, Bible teaching.
To learn more, visit foiradio.org.
Join us for Friends of Israel Today, Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
Looks like a lot of those reports about a big blue wave coming in Texas, once again, overhyped.
We admit 1.1 million immigrants lawfully every year. No nation comes close to that. It cannot be the policy of a great nation to up and reward those who unlawfully enter its country with legal status, Social Security, welfare, food stamps, work permits, and so forth.
Men seem to be becoming less male fundamentally. American men are failing in body, in mind, and in spirit. When men fail, all of us suffer. What's going on? How do we fix it?
Being a law enforcement officer is already dangerous enough. But to give the criminals a heads up that we're coming in the next 24 hours increases that risk.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio.
Howdy.
Great to have you with us. Howdy.
Yeah.
Let's grab a call to start the second hour. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. You are listening to the American Family Radio Network. Let's grab a call from a good friend of this program, Essence in Temple, Texas. Essence, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to us. Essence, are you there? Oh, no, that's not Essence's fault. That's mine. Welcome,
Hello?
Essence. Yes, Essence. I'm sorry. That's my bad. I forgot to click the right button. I got too used to.
Fisher.
Well, how are you doing? I got too used to riding in the Pullman kind of car, kind of relaxing, and I just kind of lost track of where I was. And somebody reminded me on the break that look, you are not on a train. This is the USS Focal Point. It is a warship. You don't have war trains. Yeah. So I got to get back on board the USS Focal Point and get retooled here. All right, Essence, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
So if I'm going to get on the ship, I can't say howdy anymore?
Well, I hadn't thought about that. It's kind of one of them there cowboy ships. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. I'm teetering both ways. We need another major industrial age for tariffs to work. I just think it's too soon right now for this, and I think more people have to be off welfare, all the government assistance. More people have to be working. And I think that not that many people are going to buy. They're going to go to work and do all the stuff and money make and everything, but it's going to be too expensive for people to buy. And if people are going to buy farm implements and vehicles and stuff like that, they should do it now. Yeah. And I'm also thinking about all the roads and bridges that have to be built, because all the roads, they have rebar underneath them. So that's a lot of steel.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the cost of those things is going to go up, so it's going to cost more for municipalities and counties and the federal government to build highways and to build roads and to build bridges. It's going to cost more for railroad companies to build bridges and to build cars for their trains and all that kind of stuff. All that's going to become more expensive. All right, Essence, listen, I appreciate the call. Thank you for that.
Brian, do you want to talk about motorcycles?
Oh, yeah. I asked Jeff to do some research on this. And I mentioned it occurred to me that Ronald Reagan had put a tariff on Japanese motorcycles to protect Harley-Davidson. I didn't remember the details, and I had Jeff do a little research on it. Here's what we got.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was so much, but he installed a 49.4% tariff on motorcycles. But Harley-Davidsons were known for building bigger engines, so it was only on 700 cc's and above. And that's why you see some of the Japanese came out with a 699. Yeah, exactly. And I think two companies, Honda and Kawasaki, actually, instead of paying the tariffs, stepped up their production in the United States, built more factories and increased production. That way they wouldn't have to pay a tariff with motorcycles that were manufactured right here in the United States. Yeah. It's causing more jobs for Americans.
Well, and maybe because they were Japanese companies, they didn't have to pay the tariff. I don't know if the Japanese government gave them a break, but maybe they could ship their motorcycles to Japan with no tariff since they're a Japanese company and undercut other foreign competition.
It did work real well in this case, but it was partly because the Harley-Davidson actually was bought out by some people, and they retooled and redid their factories. It was supposed to be enacted at that rate, 49.4% for 5 years. And incrementally each year should come down a little bit depending on what happened. But after 4 years, Harley-Davidson said we no longer need your protection. You can take those away.
All right, cool deal. Well, I know this is completely off topic, but I don't know anything about motorcycles, but I know a little bit about scooters because I broke my hip on one, for instance. But a lot of scooters, they're billed as 50 cc scooters, but they're only 49 cc because there's a whole set of regulations or laws or rules that kick in if you got more than 50 cc's in your motor. So they're all 49 cc.
Yeah, companies are kind of like your kids. You tell them just don't go past this line, and they'll stand right on the line.
They'll go right up to the line,
and they'll swing their foot over the line.
Let's. I want to play some clips from Tucker Carlson. He had a good segment last night, a good monologue talking about what's happening to the men in America. And this is actually a huge crisis. He is really on to something here because we've got a crisis. Everybody's talking about a crisis among women. We have to have women's studies program. We have to have gender studies program. And we have to have special programs for women. We got to get more women in the tech industries. Where the hurt is right now is in our male population. I mean, we've seen this complete switch. In the last 20 or 30 years, you now have more women in college than men. It used to be the other way around by a significant margin. You have more women going into medical school than men. That used to be completely the other way. You have more women going into law school than men. That used to be completely the other way around. Well, let's start with the first soundbite from Tucker Carlson about just the fact that in America, men are becoming less masculine, and that's something to worry about. Clip number 1.
Perhaps most bafflingly and terrifyingly, men seem to be becoming less male fundamentally, measurably. Sperm counts, for example, across the West have plummeted. They're down almost 60% since the early 1970s. Scientists don't know why this is. Testosterone levels in men have also fallen precipitously. One study found that average levels of male testosterone dropped by 1% every year after 1987, and it's not related to age. In other words, the average 40-year-old man in 2017 would have testosterone levels 30% lower than the average 40-year-old man in 1987. There is no upside to this trend. Lower testosterone levels in men are associated with depression, lethargy, weight gain, decreased cognitive ability. Nothing like this has ever happened to a population this big. So you'd think we'd want to know exactly why. What's going on? How do we fix it? And yet the media ignore that story. It's considered a fringe topic somehow. Nor is it, believe it or not, a priority in the scientific research establishment. We checked, and we couldn't find a single NIH-funded study on why testosterone levels are falling.
And so those are the numbers. Tucker Carlson says you got suicide rate is much, much higher among men than it is among women. Every mass shooter has been a male, no women. Let's grab clip number 2. Just time to squeeze it in. Tucker Carlson.
So those are the numbers, and they paint a very clear picture. American men are failing in body, in mind, and in spirit. This is a crisis. Yet our leaders pretend it's not happening. And in fact, they tell us the opposite is true. Women are victims. Men are oppressors. To question that assumption is to risk punishment. Even as women far outpace men in higher education, for example, virtually every college campus supports a women's studies department whose core goal is to attack male power. Our politicians and business leaders internalize and amplify that message. Men are privileged, women are oppressed. Hire and promote and reward accordingly. Now, that would be fine if it were true, but it's not true. At best, it's an outdated view of an America that no longer exists. At worst, it's a pernicious lie. Either way, ignoring the decline of men does not help anyone. Men and women need each other. One cannot exist without the other. That is elemental biology. It's also the reality that each one of us has lived with our parents and siblings and friends. When men fail, all of us suffer.
So, Tucker Carlson, masculinity is declining in the West. We've got to do something about it. And believe me, the church, I think, has a role to play in this. Be back after this break.
You shall not murder. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. This is the 6th commandment of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder. We are asking schools all over America to put this on their marquees, put this on their signs out in front of their school for 1 week to remind America's students that innocent life is precious. Help us spread the word about this campaign to your friends and family. Please go to our website, afa.net, and sign our open letter to America's schools. We need to proclaim this message, you shall not murder, across the land. Why? Because gun control alone will not solve matters of the heart. We need our young people to understand that murder is a violation of God's law, and also it's a violation of the laws all across this land. So help us. Go to afa.net and spread the word.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining Medishare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. Medishare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join Medishare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy. Brian Fisher is my name. Back behind the Focal Point microphone. Good to have you in the conversation today. You know, talking about the bias, we've got this bias against males. It's pernicious, it's wicked, it's evil. You know, right now, if somebody is masculine, they get accused of being all kinds of things, being a chauvinist, being a caveman, being a Neanderthal. You know, I experienced that back in the church in the 80s when feminism was first making its big surge into the church. It's now pretty much co-opted every branch of the church, including the evangelical branch. But I would try to make a stand for a biblical view of the roles of men and women in the church. And man, I just got blasted as a sexist, as a misogynist, as somebody that doesn't like women, as somebody that hates women, as somebody that's out of step with the times, as somebody that's a Cro-Magnon, somebody ought to crawl back into his cave. That's the kind of reaction that I got. So, you know, it takes a lot of courage today to be a masculine male because you're going to get blitzed. The entire world is hostile to masculine males and has an agenda to beat them to a pulp, beat them into the ground, beat them into submission, beat them into silence. And that's what Tucker Carlson is talking about. This is what it's done, this relentless war against men. You're looking at the increased suicide rate. Their health is worse. Their lifespans are 5 years shorter. They are more prone to suicide, more suicides. They're the ones that are responsible for mass shootings. So it's been a horrible problem. You know, Jeff and I were talking on the break. You had any other group that had these kind of characteristics, had these kind of issues, these kind of problems, we would be beseeching our lawmakers to fund studies, to get research into this. We've got to start departments in our colleges to look into this, what's gone wrong here. But because it's men, nobody cares. They just continue to be convenient whipping posts for the American left.
Well, we've been okay here because this is the home of muscular Christianity.
Of muscular Christianity. All right, I want to turn our attention from that topic and shift it to immigration. You know, I got a couple of more sound bites from Jeff Sessions. He went to California yesterday, talked to the law enforcement officers in the state of California. And we played one sound bite from it yesterday, and I want to play a couple of more for you today. But here's an example of some of the criminal illegal aliens that California has set free. Remember when the mayor of Oakland told everybody that ICE is on the way? That's just like, you know, you watch a TV series or a movie about gangs in the inner city. You know, when a cop car is showing up, everybody hollers out 5050. That's the code on the street for cops, so everybody can run and hide their stash and stick the drugs under a doorstep or whatever they want to do. And she was kind of a lookout. She was acting as a lookout for criminal gangs and for illegal alien criminals in California, in the Oakland area. And they estimate that they missed 800 illegal aliens. They arrested over 200, but there were 800 that they were looking for, and these guys went to ground when the mayor aided and abetted criminal aliens. Now, I believe there ought to be prosecution for that for her. But that made it, and so you got 800 illegal alien criminals that are back on the streets in Oakland operating without impunity. Here's just an example of the illegal aliens that she helped to spring. On August 2 of 2017, that's now last summer, the Santa Rosa Police Department in California arrested a citizen of Guatemala on charges of inflicting corporal injury to a spouse or cohabitant, and they booked him into the Sonoma County Jail in Santa Rosa. I just want you to observe, there's a part of this that people don't talk about much, but there is a financial cost to illegal alien criminal behavior. You know, you've got taxpayers got to foot the cost for this jail. They've got to foot the cost for the law enforcement officers that have to arrest this guy, that have to prosecute him. Courtrooms have to be paid for, judges have to be paid for, and those are all costs that Santa Rosa wouldn't have to incur if you didn't have illegal aliens there. Anyway, so he's booked for inflicting corporal injury on a spouse. ICE lodged a detainer against him the same day because it was here illegally. The next day at 8:12 p.m., a Sonoma County jail sergeant called ICE. This is next day, called ICE and told him that they were getting ready to release him, which they did at 8:36 p.m. So they gave ICE 24 minutes of notice that they were going to cut this guy loose. Well, the jail is located 65 miles from the nearest ICE field office. There's no way they could get there in time. And then on August 18, 2 weeks later, Santa Rosa Police Department arrested the same individual again as a suspect in the murder of his alleged girlfriend. He remains in Sonoma County Sheriff's custody with an ICE-lodged immigration detainer. We will see what Sonoma County does this time. They're going to turn this murderer loose in their community. They're turning criminals loose, not letting ICE get their hands on them, so we'll see what they do. Here's another one, February 25, 2018. That's this year. Less than a month ago, a citizen of Mexico was arrested near his residence in Stockton, California by ICE. By the way, Stockton's going to experiment with a universal basic income. They're going to give everybody in Stockton, I don't know what it is, $5,000 stipend per year. They don't have to work for it. They don't have to do anything for it. They just get $5,000 a year for living in Stockton. You know what they're going to get? I mean, the word's out on it. They're just going to get freeloaders from all over the United States. They'll come in, get their free $5,000. They're already on welfare, so they're going to get their food stamps. They're going to get their subsidized housing. They are going to be living rent-free at the courtesy of you and me, hardworking taxpayers. Anyway, this guy, February 25, 2018, gets arrested. On February 21, 2017, that was a year ago, he was convicted of lewd and lascivious acts with a child under the age of 14 and was sentenced to 180 days in jail, 6 months, and left in town, apparently released when his time was up, and he's out there. So, again, here's a child, innocent child, under 14, life ruined forever, damaged forever, put it that way, because ICE detainers were being ignored. February 14, 2018, that's Valentine's Day this year, a citizen of Mexico was arrested in Anaheim by ICE. Previously, in 2004, 14 years ago, he was convicted of lewd and lascivious acts with a minor under 14 and sentenced to 45 days in juvenile hall. No detainer was issued following this arrest. He was arrested again on August 10 of 2016. He was convicted of felony possession of a controlled substance. An immigration detainer was lodged, but it was not honored. He was finally deported to Mexico March 5, 2018. So with that as a backdrop, let's listen to what Jeff Sessions had to say to California law enforcement officers 2 days ago in Sacramento.
And let no one contend that we reject immigration and want to wall off America from all immigrants. President Trump and the American people know what's happening. We admit 1.1 million immigrants lawfully to permanent resident status in the United States with a clear path to citizenship, green card status, every year. No nation comes close to that. It's the highest numbers in the world. Indeed, at this unprecedented rate, we will soon have the largest percentage of non-native born in our nation's history, and the percentage is continuing to rise every year thereafter. Thus, the good and decent people of this country are right to insist that this country and its officials should end the illegality, create a rational immigration flow, protect the nation from criminal aliens, and preserve the national interest. It cannot be that someone who illegally crosses the border and 2 days later arrives in Sacramento, Dubuque, Louisville, Central Islip, New York, is home free, never to be removed. How can that be? It cannot be the policy of a great nation to up and reward those who unlawfully enter its country with legal status, Social Security, welfare, food stamps, work permits, and so forth. How can this be a sound policy? Meanwhile, those who engage in the process lawfully and patiently and wait their turn are discriminated against, it seems, at every turn.
All right, and then Jeff Sessions talks specifically as a message for the mayor of Oakland, clip 4.
Well, the mayor of Oakland has been actively seeking to help illegal aliens avoid apprehension by ICE. Her actions support those who flout the law and boldly validates illegality. There's no other way to interpret those remarks. To make matters worse, the elected lieutenant governor of the state praised her for doing so, bragging about and encouraging the obstruction of our law enforcement. The law is, I'm afraid this is an embarrassment to the proud state of California. Tom Homan, the director of ICE, has said recently, quote, being a law enforcement officer is already dangerous enough, but to give the criminals a heads up that we're coming in the next 24 hours increases that risk. I watched the mayor's statement when she said her priority is the safety of the community, but what she did had the exact opposite effect, close quote. And I think that's a fair criticism and statement. According to Acting Director Homan, ICE failed to make 800 arrests that would have been made if the mayor had not made her statement. Those are 800 wanted criminals that are now at large in that community, 800 wanted criminals that ICE will now have to pursue by other means with more difficulty in dangerous situations, all because of one irresponsible action. So here's my message to Mayor Schaaf. How dare you? How dare you needlessly endanger the lives of our law enforcement officers to promote a radical open borders agenda?
So that's Jeff Sessions' firm words to the mayor of Oakland. We'll have one more soundbite when we come back after the break. But, you know, this is just almost an unbelievable set of affairs where you have an entire state. Now, California has declared itself a sanctuary state. They actually intend to punish people that cooperate with the law. So normally, the way we do things in a tranquil, just society is the people that break the law get punished. Now in California, those who cooperate with the law are the ones that are going to get punished. That's how upside down California is. And you know, it's amazing. That used to be a paradise, and they're turning it into an absolute total sewer and septic tank. We'll be right back. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Stay with us. Be right back.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt and I couldn't pay my bills. I was feeling so bad. I got to a point where I needed some help. So I reached out and contacted Trinity.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813 to talk to a certified counselor.
They were able to take all of my different payments and put them all together.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
And they were actually able to work with my creditors. I've been able to pay off close to $15,000 in the last 18 months.
If your debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Stephanie, and I'm debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
Here on American Family Radio, this is David Wolin with Haven Ministries, inviting you to anchor your day in God's Word. What does the future hold? Most of us wish we knew, especially if you happen to be going through a tough season, or if your path forward today is unclear, or maybe you're going through something painful. You're asking questions like, why, God? How much longer? What am I supposed to do now? You might be wondering today if God is truly with you, whether He really has a plan. If any of that resonates with you today, take Psalm 33:11 to heart. It says, "The Lord's plans stand firm forever." His intentions can never be shaken. So take heart and remember, God knew this part of your path would be hard, and it won't last forever. Try out Anchor Devotional today. Visit getanchor.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. I want to get to that Jeff Sessions clip here in just a quick second. They've got a new top-level generic domain name, .bible. It's like .gov or .edu, .law, and the American Bible Society purchased that. So they purchased the top-level domain name, .bible, and they've set strict limitations on the domain that go far beyond its original applications. That's an interesting story. We'll be following this as it develops. I'm not going to go into it here in any detail, but that's an interesting deal. There's a .bible domain name now, and you know that's going to be hugely appealing. There are going to be a lot of people want to get in on that .bible domain name. So we'll see what happens. American Bible Society sitting in the catbird seat on that one, and we have explained to you what the catbird seat is. There is such a thing as a catbird, and it is a bird that sits in the top of the tree. Yep. So it can see everything down below it, and it's a catbird. He's called a catbird, so he's got the eagle eye and everything. All right, let's go to Jeff Sessions, clip number 3, and he gives another example of an illegal alien that got away from ICE.
In January, Ventura County declined a request from ICE to hold an alien Ventura had arrested and put in their custody for continuous sexual abuse of a child. Instead of being removed from the country, he was released back into the community, and now federal law enforcement officers will try to find him and arrest him wherever he may be. In recent years, the California legislature has enacted a number of laws designed to intentionally obstruct the work of our sworn immigration officers, to intentionally use every power the legislature has to undermine the duly established immigration law of America. And just think about the situation it puts California employers in. They want to help law enforcement. They want to do their civic duty. We ought to be encouraging them and thankful to them. But your state attorney general has repeatedly promised to prosecute these business owners. Let me quote what he said more than once. Ignorance of the law is no excuse if you violate it. Quote, you are subjecting yourselves to up to $10,000 in fines for violation.
That's the Attorney General of the state of California said, look, if you're an employer and you cooperate with the federal government to arrest criminal aliens, you will be subject to a $10,000 fine. Can you believe this? So completely turning the law on its head. All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit as we move toward the end of the program. I want to talk here for a minute about the Mueller investigation, where that thing is going. And there's our two congressmen, Bob Goodlatte from Virginia and Trey Gowdy from South Carolina, and they have joined forces to send a formal request to the Department of Justice that they appoint a special counsel for FISA abuse. Remember, FISA is the Federal Intelligence Survey or Surveillance Act. So they have a whole bunch of judges, 11 judges, that grant these warrants, and that's where we've had a real major problem. You know, a Steele dossier being used to get the warrant for surveilling Donald Trump and his team. And so we got all these questions about what's going on with FISA. You know, how come there was no FISA warrant to track what Hillary Clinton was doing? I mean, her email server was wide open to foreign sources. What kind of surveillance should have been done in that situation? So anyway, a lot of concerns about whether the law is being followed with regard to these FISA warrants. And here is Bob Goodlatte talking with, no, this is Trey Gowdy here talking with Bill Hemmer of Fox News about the special counsel request.
Chairman Gowdy, your letter states matters have arisen. What's changed?
What changed for me was the knowledge that there are 24 witnesses that Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General, would not have access to. So your options are DOJ investigated themselves. They can't do that because of conflict of interest. Let the Inspector General do it. Now, I'm a big fan of Mike Horowitz, but he has no jurisdiction over witnesses that have either left the department or never worked there. So when I counted up 24 witnesses that he would not be able to access were he to investigate it, yeah, only one conclusion, that's special counsel.
Who's on that list?
Everybody from Jim Comey to Andy McCabe to Rybicki, Sidney Blumenthal, Cody Shearer, anyone who no longer works for the Department of Justice or the FBI. State Department, you may recall a couple of weeks ago there was some indication that State Department employees were feeding information to Fusion GPS. They would be outside the reach of the Inspector General. So anyone who's not currently an employee of DOJ, Michael Horowitz doesn't have subpoena power to.
So Trey Gowdy is saying something very, very important about getting to the bottom of the FISA deal. You know, you've got a lot of people that were involved in this mess that have been cashiered. They no longer work for the Department of Justice. And Michael Horowitz, as the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, his jurisdiction is limited to people who are currently employed by the Department of Justice. If somebody's resigned, somebody's been fired, somebody's gone, he can't subpoena that person. He's got no jurisdiction to do that. And here, Trey Gowdy's talking about the fact you've got 24 people now that would be beyond the reach of the Inspector General. You may hear some Democrats out there calling for this to be done by the Inspector General. Why are they calling for that? Because they know that he can't talk to or subpoena the key players. He's forbidden to do that because he doesn't have jurisdiction. That's why Trey Gowdy is saying, look, you have to appoint a special counsel. You want to get to the bottom of FISA abuse, you got to do that because Horowitz can't talk to 24 of the people that have to be interviewed and investigated in this deal. Now, Bob Goodlatte, clip number 12, here's his comment on the need for a special prosecutor.
Was abused by a gathering of information from a very suspect source, not disclosing that information to the court, and in my opinion, getting authority to look into the background of an American citizen's life on questionable circumstances, and that is a very serious concern. You know, the FBI is America's premier law enforcement organization. Every day, thousands and thousands of great men and women keep us safe, investigate crime, prevent terrorist attacks, but several people at the top of this organization have engaged in activities that are questionable, and I think that in order to set the record straight, clear what is going on at the FBI, and make sure this does not happen again, we need to have an outside special counsel investigation.
Let me read from. All right, so that's both Trey Gowdy and Bob Goodlatte. And Bob Goodlatte, he's one of the really good guys. I mean, that guy is a solid citizen, is a conservative through and through, and they're joining forces to say, look, we need to have the services of a special counsel if we're going to get to the bottom of this FISA abuse, and I could not agree with them any more than I do. Just to give you an idea how out of control this thing is, I'm looking at an article today from Greensboro.com, and Mueller is looking into a meeting in the Seychelles. That's an island chain, exotic resort island chain somewhere. And he's looking into a meeting that was an effort to establish a back channel to the Kremlin. Now, let me read a little bit, just some excerpts from this article, and see if you can see what the problem with this is. Remember, I'll give it away by setting, but I want you to think about a minute for what the parameters were for Bob Mueller's investigation. What was he told to investigate? There were parameters for it. Now listen to this. Special counsel Robert Mueller has gathered evidence that a secret meeting in the Seychelles just before the inauguration of Donald Trump was an effort to establish a back channel between the incoming administration and the Kremlin. Now, there's something very, very bad wrong with this. See if you can pick it up. Here's another excerpt from this article. While Mueller is probing the circumstances of the Seychelles meeting, he's also more broadly examining apparent efforts by the Trump transition team to create a back channel for secret talks between the new administration and the Kremlin. Next paragraph, investigators now suspect that the Seychelles meeting may have been one of the first efforts, remember that word, one of the first efforts to establish such a line of communications between the two governments, these people said. Now, a couple of major things that are bad wrong with this. Let's go back to the first paragraph. He's talking about evidence that there was some meeting before the inauguration of Donald Trump. What does that mean? It means it was after the campaign. What was Robert Mueller's charter? To look into irregularities during the 2016 campaign. Irregular communications, collaboration, collusion between Trump and the Russian government. This was after the campaign. Robert Mueller had no charter to look into stuff that happened after the campaign. And then it gets even worse when you get down to this paragraph that I just read with you. This was about apparent efforts to create a back channel for secret talks. This is with the Trump transition team. Trump transition team. When do you form a transition team? After the election. So again, the transition team, this is stuff that's happening after the election, outside the charter that Robert Mueller was giving, and it was to create a back channel. And so the question is here, well, wait, hold the phone here. You're saying that Donald Trump and his campaign, they have been colluding, collaborating with the Russian government for this entire campaign. Why in the world would you need some kind of a back channel communication with them if you've been talking to them
Good point.
for a year and a half? This stuff is just absurd. And then it says, again, they suspect that the Seychelles meeting may have been one of the first efforts to establish lines of communication. Wait a minute. Yeah. You've been telling us all this time that they've been talking to Russia all this time. So, I mean, this is an article that just, I mean, it completely blows the Mueller investigation in my mind and the whole basis for it completely out of the tub. But that's kind of what we're dealing with. Story came out today that the FBI has been paying the Geek Squad, at what is it? The Best Buy. Best Buy. Yeah. They got the Geek Squad, they'll come out to your house and fix your stuff. FBI has been paying them to spy on customers for over a decade. Because people bring their computers in there, and the FBI has been paying them to spy on these computers and find illegal stuff. Now, what had happened is some of the Geek Squad people, in repairing these computers, had come across child pornography, and they quite appropriately reported that to the FBI. But apparently they went after some other stuff beyond just child pornography. They come across, and it wasn't that they were looking for it. They came across it, and they had a legal obligation to report that to the FBI. All right, we'll be back with your phone calls, talk about anything that we've talked about on the program today. Glad to hear from you. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. We'll be right back with your call.
Janet Mefford.
We must tell this world that there is a God, that he did create all that is. He came to die for you and for me and for all who would believe and put their trust in him, that his death on the cross was sufficient to pay the price for sin, and that he conquered sin and death on the third day when he rose from the dead. And he will come back to judge the quick and the dead. That's the part that's still the yet to come. He's coming back. Join me for Janet Mefford Live, weekdays at noon Central on American Family Radio.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Folks, I know what you think. I want to be able to get my money. I'm not giving my money to anybody. I'm not giving it to the church, not giving it to the ministry. I'm hoarding it, I'm keeping it, I'm going to build. And when it gets so big, I'll build another silo, and I'll build another silo after that. And I'm just going to keep growing it, because when I retire, I'm going to have more money and I know what to do with it. But look, it's important that you consider permanent income. The key word is charitable gift annuity. You notice I don't say charitable annuity. I never leave the word gift out. It's a gift.
A knowledgeable AFA Foundation representative will gladly explain the nuances of charitable gift annuities and answer your questions. Find out about charitable gift annuities when you call 800-326-4543, extension 345. 800-326-4543, extension 345. Or by visiting afafoundation.net.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, Brian Fisher here. Back on board with the USS Focal Point. I got 3 sound bites I want to get in. 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. Let's begin with Jeff Sessions. He's the Attorney General, and he's responding here to this request from Bob Goodlatte and Trey Gowdy that he appoint a special counsel. Let's listen.
I have great respect for Mr. Gowdy and Chairman Goodlatte, and we're going to consider seriously their recommendations. I have appointed a person outside of Washington, many years in the Department of Justice, to look at all the allegations that the House Judiciary Committee members sent to us, and we're conducting that investigation. Also am well aware that we have a responsibility to ensure the integrity of the FISA process. We're not afraid to look at that. The Inspector General, he has almost 500 employees, most of which are lawyers and prosecutors, and they are looking at the FISA process. We must make sure it's done properly, and we're going to do that.
So he says the Inspector General is already working on this FISA abuse. Remember, his jurisdiction is limited. If somebody's left the Department of Justice, he can't interview them, cannot subpoena them. Now, let's play the Joe Scarborough clip number 7. Remember, we talked yesterday about this blue wave idea that Democrats had. The blue wave was going to start in Texas, Ted Cruz was going to surge to a victory. The Democrats were going to turn out in ginormous numbers, and it was the start of this tsunami that was going to sweep Democrats into power in 2018. Here's Joe Scarborough, who's more Democrat than Republican, more liberal than conservatives, and he's talking about what happened in Texas on Tuesday.
It looks like reports that we've been hearing leading in, talking about registration and early voting. Democrats up 105%, Republicans up 10%. Looks like a lot of those reports about a big blue wave coming in Texas, once again, overhyped. And I say once again because we've been hearing of the coming blue wave in Texas now for about as long as we heard about the coming red wave in Pennsylvania up until Donald Trump's win.
All right, so Joe Scarborough, blue wave, overhyped. I think that's exactly right. I got another story I don't have time to get to, but 5 Democrats that are in states that Trump won are up for re-election, and they are behind in the polling data to generic Republicans. They don't have an opponent yet, and they're losing to a Republican that doesn't have a face and doesn't have a name. So I think this whole idea that 2018 was going to be some kind of blue wave for the Democrats completely, I believe, overblown. One last clip, and then we'll go to the phones. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Talk about anything we've talked about on the program today. Here's Meghan McCain. She is a self-identified conservative, self-identified pro-life person. She's on The View with these rabid left-wing women like Joy Behar, who apparently has apologized for what she said about Mike Pence. But she apologized, like to her boss at MSNBC or whatever program, whatever network. That's not enough. That's not enough. You know, the apology needs to match the sin. If the sin is private, the apology is private. But if the sin is public, as hers was, the apology needs to be public. Anyway, this is a little excerpt where Joy Behar and Meghan McCain have a little bit of an exchange over the abortion issue. Let's listen.
The definition is the belief that women and men should have equal rights and opportunities.
But does that mean can I push back on this? Does that mean the rights of unborn women as well? I mean,
does that mean so? Joy Behar looks up the definition of feminism. It says equal treatment for men and women. And Meghan McCain says, and good for her, does that include unborn women? And that's a very, very good question. And The View really did not have a response to that question. You know, and I used to tell people when I'd be in conversations with them, look, I believe in equal rights for unborn women when the subject of the ERA would come up. All right, let's go to the phones, 888-589-8840. Jeff?
Isn't today International Women's Day or something? Was that today?
That's
yes.
today? Okay.
So that would be a good time to bring that up.
Yep. I don't keep track of that stuff, but my intrepid and all-knowing staff does.
Yeah, we do it so you don't have to.
So I don't have to. Yep. Let's go to Jeff, Park Hills, Missouri. Jeff, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes, thank God for Donald Trump. These tariffs are long overdue on Mexico and Canada. Finally, we got a president in here. I want to celebrate with all the liberal Democrats out there listening that we got a president in here with a backbone. Praise God.
All right. Well, you're right, Jeff. And he's taking heat, but he is not backing down. I mean, he got a lot of complaint from Republicans over the tariff issue. And I still am I'm not a fan of tariffs. That's still where I'm at, although this listening audience is almost unanimously for tariffs. And there's a lot of discussion. Obviously, people go back and forth. Some people change their views. I've listened to other conservative talk radio hosts that have been on one side of this issue and then another over the course of their broadcasting careers. 888-589-8840 is the number. Let's go to Michael in Columbus, Ohio. Michael, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian. I actually work for one of the auto manufacturers that you were talking about earlier, and I just wanted to kind of give an example on the tariffs and how our company responded. Now, when they had the initial tax thing for that American-owned businesses were going to get the tax break. Since our company is actually operated in the United States, we got part of the tax break because some of our goods were imported. Now, when that happened, in order to get the full tax break that we wanted, what we did is our company actually created 300 new jobs for our one plant. So the goods that we're getting imported because there was an import tax, but companies like Volkswagen, that could be the end of them because they don't have plants inside the United States. But since we have plants in the United States to get the full tax break, we created the 300 new jobs. So what our company is probably going to do, since we like to buy local anyways, if there's going to be a tax on the import of steel, most likely what our company is going to do is say, okay, that's fine, we'll just, to get the tax break still, or to not have the tariff hit us, what we're going to do is we're just going to buy steel from the United States. And that's pretty much the stance our company has done, and they've done actually a very good job at actually using the system to not only just benefit the company, but to benefit the workers within the United States. And so that's kind of my view on the tariff.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you heard it from somebody boots on the ground. Their company has created 300 new jobs in the wake of Donald Trump's tax plan and in anticipation of the steel tariff. So working for Michael's company already. Let's go down and grab a call from Michael in Morgantown, North Carolina. Michael, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to say that I am sort of for tariffs in some form with at least some nations, because we must protect our steel industries in case of war, etc. If our steel industries go under, we have nothing to make the machinery that we need if we are attacked or whatever. And so, I mean, somehow there we have to protect the steel industries. And I'm not talking about protecting them the way, they're too big to fail or something like that. We need to make sure that our steel industries can maintain here in America.
Yeah, kind of an essential part of our economy, and a very essential part. If we ever got into a situation where we were at war, we may not be able to import steel. Got to be able to produce your own. Okay, Michael, appreciate the call. Thank you for that. Let's grab a call from Harold in Texas. Harold, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
I just want to let you know, in my opinion, the tariffs are great, but the biggest thing is the pollution laws that killed the steel industry in the United States. I don't know if you're aware, but Armco Steel used to have a major plant in Houston and supplied ships and any kind of steel product you wanted, and they were shut down in the late 60s, early 70s because of pollution laws. And U.S. Steel also had a plant here, and they went out, I understood they moved to Brazil.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you, Harold, and I've talked about this before. This is another one of those things. These environmental regulations, talk about regulations in general, but environmental regulations in particular have been a killer for U.S. manufacturers. That was one of the differences between the cost of Chinese steel and American-made steel is the Chinese don't have any of the labor restrictions. They don't have any of the economic regulations. They don't have any of the environmental restrictions that American producers have. So they're operating, I mean, it's like throwing bricks in the backpack of every American manufacturer when you have environmental regulations, that load that other manufacturers in other countries don't have to carry. All right, Harold, Harold is right about that. It's caused American companies to go completely out of business. Pollution laws, that's just Environmental Protection Agency. Of course, back in 1969, that was before the EPA, but that doesn't mean you didn't have pollution laws that were just out of control. All right, let's grab a call from Sean in Lafayette, Indiana. Sean, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Well, I just was thinking, we were talking about this whole Comey case and how much power he had since J. Edgar Hoover, and now you have Mueller and all this collusion and garbage that's being shown as a farce, and this guy's continued to allow to just run free willy-nilly. You're giving him the same, in my opinion, same kind of power that everyone was saying that we were glad that we got rid of Comey for. But now it's like this Trump and them are just letting Mueller just run rampant with no reins.
Yeah, and that's a real problem. And, and this goes, something we talked about before, it goes back to the very beginning of the special counsel, where his charter was to look for collusion between Trump and Russia in the 2016 campaign. Well, they've been looking for a year and a half, and they haven't found any evidence of collusion whatsoever. And even Adam Schiff last week said, look, there's nothing there. We haven't found it. There's no evidence of collusion anywhere. And plus, collusion is not even a crime. I mean, the law says if you're going to appoint a special prosecutor, you have to identify a crime that he needs to investigate to see if that crime needs to be prosecuted.
Hey, Brian, we're at the end of the show. I just want to tell you thank you, because you made 2 hours of talking about tariffs fun again. That was great.
And I want to thank the listening audience. Normally that would be death on wheels. By the way, here's a travel tip. Go to San Diego. Watch out. There is a 5-foot, 35-pound reptile named Bubbles who is on the loose, broke out of a pet shop. So watch yourself. Be back tomorrow. See you then.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.